2021. So am I. And apparently, sincerest apologies for all the technical difficulties. If you're just tuning in, my computer kept kicking me out of Restream and letting me back in, telling me that we were live, but that there was no connection. And so for those of you who are tuning in, we are live here on PressBox, on YouTube, and on Facebook for the Bat Around this morning. Today's show brought to you by Royal Farms. Royal Farms world-famous chicken is always fresh, never frozen. Right now, you can get either a 10-piece dark or an 8-piece mix for just $15, or get a 4-piece mix with Western fries and a biscuit for just $10. And in the morning, enjoy any size hot or iced coffee and a breakfast sandwich for just $5. Plus, have you tried their new baby cake hash browns? I have. They are delicious. Stop in your neighborhood Royal Farms today. We were supposed to have Glenn Clark joining us today on the Bat Around. Still waiting on him to jump in on the show. This could be my fault because we agreed that he would join the show last week, and I forgot to reach back out to him this week to confirm that he was still able to do the show. So it could just be yours truly moving forward on the show today. So the Orioles, they're making a little bit of news today. This week, I should say. A small signing. The Orioles just signed former Angels top prospect Jordan Adams, the former 2018 first-round pick, 17th overall of the Los Angeles Angels, is coming over to the Orioles. He's known for crazy sprint speed. He is in the 80th percentile. 80 grade speed, and it puts him in the 98th percentile amongst all sprint speeds in Major League Baseball. Known to be a plus defender in center field, former football player. Stop me if you heard this one before, Jahmai Jones. Anyone? 28 games in the majors over the last 2 seasons, just a 176 average with a 421 OPS, 3 for 5 in stolen base attempts. In the minor leagues, in 6 minor league seasons, 252 average, just a 710 OPS, 144 stolen bases and 176 attempts. So the Orioles get a burner. I'm sure he's going to get an opportunity to become a 4th outfielder for them. Makes you wonder what the plan is moving forward then with Jorge Mateo. Also makes you wonder if Jorge Mateo is going to be ready for spring training and opening day. You know, the Orioles, we've been hearing talk about how Mateo can play up the middle, either at second base or shortstop. He can play in the outfield if they need him to. He's got that elite sprint speed. Well, you've also got Ramon Arias on the roster and Manuel Rivera on the roster. You're trying to figure out where to play these guys. You're pretty sure that Jackson Holliday's going to be your everyday second baseman and Jordan Westburg's your everyday third baseman, beyond a shadow of a doubt with Westburg. And I'd have to imagine the betting favorite would be Jackson Holliday to be the starting second baseman for the Baltimore Orioles at the end of March. So what does that mean for Ramon Arias and for Jorge Mateo, especially with the addition of Jordan Adams? That remains to be seen, but we saw what Ramon Arias could do when he was thrust into that starting role with the Orioles once Jordan Westburg went down at the end of July last year. If the Orioles want to keep Ramon Arias, it kind of pushes Mateo out if you bring in a Jordan Adams to be your 4th outfielder. Now, again, this is a guy who hasn't had a ton of success in the minors, hasn't had a ton of success in the majors, and so we'll just have to be in a wait and see. Joining us now, special treat for everybody from Glenn Clark Radio. He is Glenn Clark. Glenn, good morning. Sincerest apologies. I forgot to check in with you to make sure you were still good to do the show today. So I'm sorry.
All good, buddy. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you indeed. Thank you for joining us today. How's everything going in Glenn's world?
It's been a tough week. And I apologize. I'm dropping on this on you. We had a death in our family this week, but we, here we are. They think the Orioles got Matt Bowman, right? Life is good.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry for the death in your family. I did see that on Facebook, and I've been meaning to reach out to you about that. So sincerest apologies and condolences to you. Just talking about how the Orioles signed an Angels former top prospect. Stop me if you've heard this one before, Glenn. A top Angels prospect who is known as a football player and a baseball player who's got elite speed. Jahmai Jones, nope. Jordan Adams coming over to the Orioles. And
hell yeah.
Glenn, I was just questioning. It seems like he's going to be in the mix for the 4th outfielder spot on this team. And look, we don't want to get too worked up and spend too much time talking about Jordan Adams, but when you've got Jorge Mateo on the roster, does a signing like this tell you that either A, Mateo might not be ready for opening day, or B, that maybe they're looking at keeping a Ramon Arias and getting somebody who's more of a true outfielder to be a fourth outfielder for the ball club?
So it's a good question, Paul. I guess all of this comes with the caveat of are you making a signing like this with the plan being that he's definitively on the team? Like, and I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, right? Like, I don't know. It's a minor league deal. I think it's also possible that sometimes you're just filling out a spring training roster. Now, I get what somebody would say. Why are you bothering to worry about filling out your spring training roster in December when you haven't gotten the like real players that you need to get in order to put together this team? If Jorge Mateo is ready, they're gonna play Jorge Mateo. Like they're going to. That's been proven time and time again. So where are those opportunities coming from? Presumably Gunner's in the lineup every day, right? Like there's almost no doubt about that. Are they telling you that they're not so sure that Jackson Holiday is definitively ready to be in the lineup every day, and that there's going to be opportunities still for Jorge Mateo to play second base?
Right.
Because if that's the case, then yeah, I guess they could use some legitimate outfield depth. But boy, isn't that a little bit more concerning if what they're coming away from is saying that we're not sure yet that Jackson Holiday is ready to hit from both sides of the plate? God, that's a scary thought. I think I'm going to choose to believe it's just we're putting together a bunch of bodies for spring training. We're not making. I think Jorge Mateo is going to have to play in the outfield. I think that's going to have to be the case this season. But I don't know. I got to flesh that out a little bit more and see what it really says.
Well, yeah, and I think I tend to agree with you that this is more minor league depth than anything else. So he hasn't proven much at the big league level. And look, it's a small cup of coffee, 28 games at the big league level over 2 seasons, 6 minor league seasons with a 710 OPS, but 144 stolen bases in those 6 minor league seasons. Look, and somebody brought this up to me a few weeks back. I believe it was Zach Moore. You could very well see a situation where it's Jackson Holiday against righties and Jorge Mateo at second base against lefties. Jorge Mateo mashes left-handed pitching. He's proven that his defense is elite at second base. He looked very good and very comfortable over there last season. The thing about Jorge Mateo, Glenn, is that every year that he's been an Oriole, he's found his way into significant playing time.
He's going to play.
He's absolutely going to play. Yep. Hopefully, if he does play as much as we think that he will, they will utilize his speed more, because we saw him from June 1st on. He had 3 stolen bases. And a guy like Jorge Mateo, he's on your roster primarily because of his speed and his defense. Whatever he gives you with the bat is a bonus. But if he's not using his speed to his advantage, then he's really just a one-dimensional player for you.
Well, it was a common refrain that we felt as the season went on is why isn't this team being more aggressive? And what happened to what happened to this game I love, right? And like the thing that we learned to love about the scrappy 2022 and 2023 Orioles just sort of seemed to go away in 2024. But no, I'm with you. Like Jorge Mateo should be the guy that's being uber aggressive, the guy that's doing almost reckless things on the base paths to try to create for this team, in particular, as they're going through their offensive struggles. Jorge Mateo is going to play. There's no question that he's going to play. They love Jorge Mateo. They love what he brings. And unquestionably, he is going to hit against lefties. Like he does. The numbers back it up. He is worthy of being in the lineup against lefties. The answer might very well be exactly the way that we both laid it out, that Jackson Holiday is just not ready to hit from both sides of the plate, and that's where they are. It's just saying that out loud becomes more concerning, because Jackson Holiday is not supposed to be a helpful baseball player. He's not supposed to be, a guy that he's supposed to be a superstar. He's supposed to be a true game changer. And so the world in which we are considering the possibility that the plan is Jackson Holiday isn't hitting lefties, I get it. It might very well be that's the best thing that they can do, but it's just alarming for a different reason. It's alarming for the reason of, dude, that's not what Jackson Holiday is supposed to be, an everyday rock star bat for the next 5 to 10 years. And that's the concern that you have when you say that sentence out loud.
Absolutely. And let's give Jackson Holiday a little bit of leeway here. He is freshly 21 as of 2 weeks ago. Freshly 21. They put him at the top of the order at the end of the season in a game that didn't really matter. The Orioles were already locked into a wild card position. And he went 4 for 5 in that game. He started at shortstop. He had a nice game. They took away the leg kick. And he's going to get a ton of at-bats in spring training to prove that he can hit left-handed and right-handed pitching. Now, we've heard it from Buck Showalter in the past. Don't be fooled by spring training numbers and by numbers in September. We saw both of those for Jackson Holiday. He's got an opportunity to prove it starting in the middle of February, and we will certainly see. Now, somebody else who has an opportunity to prove it for the Orioles is a new pitcher that they have brought in from the NPB, Japanese pitcher Tomoyuki Sugano. He's been brought in on a 1-year, $13 million deal, Glenn. And my initial reaction to this was, well, Corbin Burnes isn't in the fold as of now. And your answer is a 35-year-old rookie.
Right.
You know, and that's the initial reaction. You look into the numbers, and this is a pitcher who has won the Central League MVP 3 times in 2014, 2020, and 2024. He's a 2-time Sawamura Award winner, which is the NPB Cy Young equivalent in 2017 and 2018. So not even in his MVP season. So he's got some significant hardware in different seasons. 136 and 74 career record in the NPB with a 2.43 ERA last season when he won the MVP. 15 and 3, 1.67 ERA, just 16 walks with 111 strikeouts in 24 starts, 156 and 2/3 innings pitched. Glenn, 16 walks in 156 and 2/3 innings. That is impeccable control. The fastball, low 90s, but this is a guy that throws 6 pitches. Splitter might be his best pitch. Your thoughts on the signing of this pitcher? What does it mean for the Orioles? And are you okay if this is the top pitcher that they sign this offseason?
No, that part we have to say out loud, right? Like, no, that's not okay for that to be the answer, because to your point, there's a lot to like about Sugano. It's funny because I see that our friend Zach Moore is chiming in the comments, and Zach and I were talking about him the other night. There really is, and there's almost an Eflin comparison to be made with the command, that he's not going to overwhelm you, obviously, with his speed. Like, that's the thing that the first thing everybody reacts to is, really, you're going with a guy that's going to be sitting at 92, but his command is pinpoint. Like, it's, and you would think that translates, like, your questions about, the competition that he's facing in Japan, you would think that pinpoint accuracy is something that would translate from Japan to Major League Baseball. So there's a lot to like there. But to pencil him in as more than a back end of the rotation guy would be foolhardy until you see it. Like, could it be that he ends up becoming a Wei-In Chen-esque acquisition? I think it's, given what it is that he brings to the table, I think it's totally plausible. But to make that assumption, to me, would be a significant error at this point. So no, I still think they need another mid-range, another 2 to 3 at worst type of starter. I think we would all still love for there to be a number 1, and again, who that is, because we still don't think it's going to be Corbin Burnes, but are they in ultimately on Dylan Cease, whatever that would be. But I if it's going to be bulk pitching over top-notch pitching, that still needs to involve, like what the Dodgers did a year ago. And we can argue about Yamamoto and whether he qualifies as an ace or not. We don't think of him as a traditional ace, but the Dodgers had 3 legitimate number 2 starters that they were able to throw out there between Yamamoto, Flaherty, and Buehler, right? Like, those were 3 legitimate number 2 guys, even if they aren't Corbin Burnes workhorses, even if they aren't that type of ace pitcher. So I'm willing to listen to the argument, and Zach and I were talking about the other day about bulk pitching versus, ace, right? Like, is what you really need an ace, or is what you really need bulk starting pitching? And I'll listen to that argument, but the bulk starting pitching still has to be a handful of legit number 2s. And we think that you've got that in Zach Eflin. When he's at his best, Grayson Rodriguez is that guy, but again, it's when he's at his best and it's when he's healthy, right?
Right.
It's a heck of a combination. And sure, you think Kyle Bradish can be that guy when he returns, but when is that? And is he Kyle Bradish as soon as he returns? So I still think that we're talking about a scenario where you need another legitimate at worst 2 to 3. And could Sugano be that? Perhaps. But assuming that isn't something that I'm willing to do.
Oh, I'm absolutely not willing to do that either. I like the signing of him, but it's got to be that and the Orioles have been linked as of yesterday, at least rumored to have checked in with the Twins regarding a possible trade for Pablo Lopez. They could be in on Roki Sasaki, and maybe this signing of oh my gosh, maybe the signing of Sugano, thank you, is a precursor to try and get a more favorable position to nab Roki Sasaki. And if you get a young 23-year-old who throws 103 miles an hour for your rotation, I'm good with that. If that's what the Orioles do this offseason, I'm good with somebody who's under team control, who has that kind of upside for your franchise. But it can't just be Sugano and then let's go with the rest of the rotation, because Glenn, right now that rotation looks like Zach Eflin, Grayson Rodriguez, Dean Kramer, Sugano, and Cade Povich or Albert Suarez. I just don't think that you can compete in the American League East with that rotation. Now, look, if you have an elite bullpen to back up that rotation, okay, let's get to work here. But they don't have that either. A lot of eggs in the Felix Bautista basket, assuming that he's going to hit the ground running. And I just don't know that that's the case, Glenn.
Oh, no. I don't know how anybody could think that. And again, not knowing what the date is either, right? Like, I get with Bautista that there's more belief that it could be, at the beginning of the season than there would be, obviously, for the guys that got hurt last year. But no, like, no way is that something that still has to be an element of found money to me. That in going about how I'm building a team and projecting the team, I would still want there to be, and I know a lot of people have brought up Tanner Scott in this conversation, and then there would be the additional benefit of that being a left hand. Like, I would still want to have had one more extraordinary leverage arm into this conversation. And I get it. There were things to like about Soto. There's things to like. I would still want to have added one more legit high-end leverage arm to the back end of this bullpen to at least be the backup plan for Felix Bautista to start the season, at more significantly, maybe to be the type of that as Felix Bautista still has to ramp up as he returns. You don't have to use him for those 5-out saves that you were using him for in 2023 that we appreciated so greatly. I don't know that you can make plans that that's part of the equation in 2025. So I think you need to have another legit surefire arm at the back end of the bullpen as well. And that's why I think Tanner Scott was so appealing to so many.
Yeah, and you make the point, those 5-out saves for Felix Bautista, they pitched him till his arm fell off, essentially. Correct. It was like, we know that we have the greatest reliever in Major League Baseball right now in the back end of our bullpen. Let's bring him out as soon as we can to get through the 8th and 9th inning. And now we're looking at Sir Anthony Dominguez, who he was fine last year, but he wasn't all that inspiring, at least not to me anyway. I was so nervous he was going to come in and give up a home run at the drop of a hat. Then Gregory Soto, we're talking about Gregory Soto right now like he's an elite back-end reliever, where when he came in last year, we were puckering on the back end here, waiting for him to walk the world and then give up a bunch of base hits. So the Orioles need to add that back-end reliever, whether that's Tanner Scott or whether that's Kyle Finnegan or whoever is left on the open market right now, or maybe you trade for somebody. They do need to address the bullpen issues. They sort of did yesterday. Daniel Pitts wants to know, why did we sign Matt Bowman yesterday for essentially the same contract Jacob Webb got from Texas? I'd rather have Webb. And for those of you that don't know, the Orioles re-signed Matt Bowman yesterday. If he's it's a minor league contract with an invite to spring training. If he's in the major leagues, the contract is $1.1 million with $400,000 in incentives. Had a 3.45 ERA for the Orioles last year, Glenn, in 15 2/3 innings pitched out of the pen. I mean, I hate that that's what we're talking about right now. And that's the move that we're talking about right now for the bullpen. It's still only December 21st. It's the first day of winter, but spring training is going to be here before you know it. The Orioles have not done much to address this bullpen at all, Glenn. Matt Bowman, it can't do much for you.
No, it obviously doesn't do much for him. It's funny because when I looked at the numbers, I was like, man, what was Matt Bowman maybe more helpful than I remember him being? Like, I just sort of remember him being a guy. And to be fair, you would have to assume that's the only thing that he would be. Here's one more arm to throw in, and this is somebody saying like, yeah, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. In a more credible world, we'd say, hey, you're going to get the real arms, but you also need some Matt Bowmans too. You need to fill a bullpen, and remember the guys are going to get hurt in spring training, and in a world where we were confident they were going to address the leverage part of the bullpen, we'd be fine with bringing back Matt Bowman too. We'd say, okay, fine, bring in a Matt Bowman because you're going to need a full litany of guys and somebody's going to get hurt and you might need to have Matt Bowman on your team. The problem is, again, they haven't done those things. So now we're reacting like, this is it. This is what you're doing. This is how you're addressing the bullpen. I'm going to choose to believe that there's still more coming. The point about, would you rather have Jacob Webb? They kind of clearly didn't want Jacob Webb. That
Right.
was, I don't know if that's a medical thing. I don't know what that is, but they did not need to move on from Jacob Webb. They chose to move on from Jacob Webb. So to say, do I give them benefit of doubt? Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. Between the two at that money, sure. Jacob Webb has proven it a little bit more to me than Matt Bowman has, but they made the outright choice to say, no, we're good. We don't need Jacob Webb on this baseball team. So I hope that was for legitimate reasons.
Well, and the lackluster signing, to put it frankly, it got me thinking, Glenn, about the rest of the teams in division and what they've done as compared to the Orioles. Now, before we get into that, I want to remind everybody to check out the Governor's Challenge. The top high school basketball talent from across the country returns to Wacomico Civic Center December 26th through the 30th. You can witness 5 full days of elite competition featuring over 140 high school basketball teams. For tickets and info, visit govchallenge.org. That's govchallenge.org. So, Glenn, I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, Matt Bowman, Tyler O'Neill, Sugano, Gary Sanchez. What's going on here? What are we doing?
Yeah.
And then I look at it, and let's go through this division a little bit here. The Orioles additions, they've added Tyler O'Neill, Gary Sanchez, Tomoyuki Sugano, Matt Bowman. Subtractions to this point: Corbin Burnes, Anthony Santander, Danny Coulombe, Jacob Webb, James McCann, John Means, Eloy Jimenez, and Birch Smith. And you're like, well, they're replacements for the guys that they lost, especially Corbin Burnes and Anthony Santander. They don't get you too excited. Tyler O'Neill, he can be a really good player, but he's also got to prove that he can stay on the field. And it's like, it feels like the Yankees have done everything. Their latest move, they've gotten Fernando Cruz, an electric arm from the Reds, who's had a little bit of control issues. The ERA numbers are far less impressive than his FIP numbers, but they traded a backup catcher to get that pitcher. But they've also added Max Fried, Devin Williams, Cody Bellinger, Jonathan Loizaga is back to pitch out of the bullpen. And then you look at what they've lost. They lost Juan Soto, Nestor Cortez, Gleyber Torres, Lou Trevino, Anthony Rizzo, Clay Holmes, Tommy Canley, Alex Verdugo, and Tim Hill. They've lost a lot off of their roster, a lot. And their replacements, while very good, I look at those replacements and my knee-jerk reaction is they might be better right now than they were last year. But then when you look at what they lost significant talent off of their roster and have only really replaced a portion of that.
If it had been Kyle Tucker that they had acquired instead of Cody Bellinger, I would almost be inclined to say they are better, right? Like I'd almost be inclined to say that's a better all-around baseball team adding in Max Fried. To your point, yeah, they've lost a lot, but they've lost some like inconsistent in there, right? Like Nestor Cortez was a reliable starter who in moments was like, damn, that guy's special. Why didn't the Orioles keep him around all those years ago? But never really became like the top-notch starter that in moments he looked like he was capable of being. I'm not terrified of the Yankees, but are they definitively on paper better than the Orioles? Hell yeah, they are. Like definitively on paper, they're absolutely a better baseball team than the Orioles are. There's no, we can do all of but what if, Jackson Holiday becomes Jackson Holiday? We can do all of those things we want to envision a world in which the Orioles can be the division winner. But without question, the Yankees are a better baseball team today, before any game has been played, than the Orioles are by some margin, not, 15 games, but by some margin. Now, guys get hurt, and there's still going to be a 162 game season for a lot of things to play out. I really did when they were in play for Tucker. I looked at it and said, "Holy crap! How are the Yankees going to end up coming out of losing Juan Soto and being a better team than they were? Like,
Right.
how is that going? That's insane to me." And I'm not like, Bellinger could still be extraordinarily helpful, but he's not Kyle Tucker. So I think I'm with you that it's still probably closer to even at this point. But yeah, if it had been Tucker, man, I think they would have been terrifying, to be totally honest with you.
Absolutely. And because Tucker, maybe he doesn't get on base of this. He gets on base with a fine percentage. He doesn't get on base like nobody gets on base like Juan Soto does. But the average is higher, and he's got just as much power, and he's a better outfield defender. Now, AJ McCurdy, a big time participant in the show, says, "Why do all these Oriole media guys think Cody Bellinger isn't all that anymore? I know Paul doesn't, but everybody thinks Bellinger isn't all that anymore, and I couldn't disagree more." And to that point, Cody Bellinger was a player who, for the last 2 years, I have been begging the Orioles to make a move for. I think Cody Bellinger fits perfectly in Baltimore. He can play all three outfield positions. He can play first base. He can DH. And with that beautiful left-handed swing, that scoreboard looks so enticing to a player like that. And then when I saw the Yankees traded for him, I was like legitimately upset. Legitimately upset. I love Cody Bellinger, and I just think that dude in the right lineup is a difference maker. He's not Kyle Tucker. To your point, he is certainly not Kyle Tucker. But I think that Cody Bellinger has a lot left in the tank, and you have him being protected by Aaron Judge. I think Cody Bellinger is going to have a big year, especially playing in Yankee Stadium.
There's no doubt that having Aaron Judge behind him will help. Here's my issue with Cody Bellinger. He's had one special season since 2019, right? And I was trying to do the math. So his OPS since that 2019 season, which was obviously his best season, absurd. And nothing that he's done has compared to 2019. He's gone OPS 789, 542, 654. Then in 2023, he was really good again. He OPS 881. And then last year it was 751. And I'm not saying that you don't take that. I'm not saying that would be bad. I just, if we're using phrases like all that or special or something, like you can get that from somewhere else. Like someone else can OPS 751 for you. And if he was doing it and it was more all or nothing, there are things that Cody Bellinger does that are helpful, that are beneficial, but he got on base at a 325 clip last year. Like I can't pretend like I think that is earth shattering or, anything similar to what Kyle Tucker I would expect him to do this year. I don't know. I think Cody Bellinger, maybe if you were a lineup that didn't have as many left-handed bats as you do, I would be more inclined. And I think in the past, maybe I would been more interested in Cody Bellinger because of that. But like, you've got nothing but left-handed bats in this line. I know you've got Tyler O'Neill now too. You're loaded with left-handed bats, or you've been loaded with left-handed bats. I don't think Cody Bellinger stands out among them, other than, again, one season in 2019 where he was otherworldly, and then another good season in 2023. Everything other than that kind of says he's a guy. Like, there's 2 seasons, and I guess his rookie season, but we're so far removed from that it's not even really worth discussing. I don't know. I just in name value, I still like Cody Bellinger. In actual production, he just hasn't been that guy for the most part.
Well, and that's the thing. I look at Cody Bellinger, and I think coming to the Orioles, he's a complimentary piece, and I think he's a really good complimentary piece. If he were to come here, I wouldn't be looking at him to be the guy. You've got the guy on your team in a couple different players. I think Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, when he gets right, Jordan Westberg. I think those are the guys on your team, and then hopefully that we're also talking about Jackson Holliday in the same vein. Cody Bellinger coming here, he just adds to a really good team, in my opinion. Going to the Yankees, being protected by Aaron Judge, I'd be willing to bet that Cody Bellinger is going to have more like a 2023 season than what he's done wrapped around that. Now, That being said, it's up to Cody Bellinger to prove it. He's had more down seasons than up seasons, as you alluded to, since 2019. I just think I like the bat and I like the player, and I just think that and I also like the personality. I think that he would be a great fit in any clubhouse. So that's just my take on Cody Bellinger. Today's show brought to you by Help My Gambling Problem. If you or a loved one has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit helpmygamblingproblem.org for free confidential services. That is 1-800-GAMBLER or visit helpmygamblingproblem.org for free confidential services. Glenn, let's get into this offense a little bit then. There are a lot of lefties on this team. You look at an Orioles potential lineup, and this would be my potential lineup because I think that Gunnar Henderson should be moved to the 3-hole for this team starting from day one. So I would have Jackson Holliday leading off at second base, Adley batting second at catcher, Gunnar batting third, Tyler O'Neill batting fourth in right field, Jordan Westburg.
Are you planning on Tyler O'Neill being an everyday player?
Well, the Orioles have said he's going to be an everyday player, so that I have to take them at their word for now. He crushes lefties. He's a good defender, decent speed, tons of power. I have to imagine that they're giving him $17 million AAV to be an everyday player. Jordan Westburg batting fifth at third base, Kalzer sixth in left field, Mountcastle seventh at first base. Then you either have Heston Kjerstad or Ryan O'Hearn DHing with batting eighth, Cedric Mullins in center field. And batting ninth for this team. No. Is that enough? Is the addition, and see, I don't think it's enough either, but I think that the Orioles do. And I don't think that they have any plans on bringing in another bat for this lineup. And I think that they are still missing a middle of the order bat. Like Anthony Santander right now is gone. And we'll discuss that here in a little bit. Right now, Anthony Santander is gone. You replaced him with Tyler O'Neill. Maybe he hits for a little higher average, maybe gets on base a little bit higher of a clip, but not significantly so. I just feel like they have not addressed a hole in the middle of their order that frankly has been there.
I think that the argument was that you needed to upgrade the middle of your order. And right now, I don't know that again, if you get a healthy version of Tyler O'Neill and he's more helpful against righties than you would expect, then maybe it's a wash at best, right? Like you're talking about if things go right, you've got a wash in the middle of your order. You needed more, you needed more pop in the middle of the order. And yes, if Gary Sanchez hits 12 home runs, that's clearly an upgrade over McCann, but it's kind of negligible at that point. No, it's not enough. And yes, you can do the, hey, if Mountcastle has the shorter porch now, to left and left center field, that should help him and the power numbers should go up. And again, you can squint and make the argument for why it's going to be better. And you can also say it's going to be better simply because everything regressed last year. So there's going to be a level of aggression to the mean, but is it good enough? To win a World Series? No. I mean, is it good enough to be competitive? Absolutely. It's good enough to be competitive. And I do think it's reasonable to assume that Adley Rutschman's going to be better than he was in the second half of the season. My God, he had better be better than he was in the second half of last season. And it's reasonable to assume, as I mentioned, that Mountcastle would be helped by the wall coming back in. And it's reasonable to assume that, you can get a even better version of Jackson Holliday that can include some more pop, right? And we even saw the pop. That was the one thing that did kind of come through from the little bit of Jackson Holliday that we did see. So we assume that continues to grow. And there's you can make all of those arguments, all of them, right? But then you come back to, are you assuming that all of them are going to play out and all of those guys are going to no, I can't perfect world this. And so, no, this isn't enough. And I absolutely was interested everybody was interested in Teoscar Hernandez. Teoscar Hernandez seemed to fit the bill of exactly what this team needed, but they're not interested in spending money like that. So I wasn't enamored with Christian Walker, but I was interested in Christian Walker. And 360 for Christian Walker just doesn't seem unreasonable. It seems like if you're not going to be swimming in the biggest waters, you should be the team that's making 3 for 60 moves for Christian Walker. That does feel like it's a real upgrade. And then figure out where the at-bats come. Having to protect at-bats for Ryan O'Hearn. I love Ryan O'Hearn, but I can't like that can't be a priority. And if the priority is needing
Right.
at-bats for Kobe Mayo and Heston Kjerstad, I understand that. Like, I get it, that's if they're going to be part of this. But at some point, you're doing a lot of hope, a lot of if this goes well, if this goes well, if this goes well. And I can't believe this deep into this, that's still where this team is. It just doesn't seem like the way that this should be going.
Well, and you talk about Ryan O'Hearn, and there is a clear logjam on this team, right? I don't see how this team, Glenn, carries Ryan Mountcastle, Ryan O'Hearn, Heston Kjerstad, Ramon Arias, Jorge Mateo, and Emmanuel Rivera. Realistically, of those 6 players I just named, only 3 of them can be here. Tyler O'Neill plays every day, whether it's in the outfield or at DH. O'Hearn and Kjerstad, DH, play the outfield. Mountcastle and O'Hearn, first base or DH. Adley and Sanchez catch. And you know that Gary Sanchez is going to DH some days. You know that that's going to happen.
At whatever point Basayo comes up, right? Like
Mhm.
you know, you gave him legitimate money. He's not just here to be the bridge to Basayo. He's part of this team this season.
Right. Well, and you gave $8 million to Gary Sanchez. You gave $8.5 million on an option that you picked up for Ryan O'Hearn. You've got Ramon Arias, who can play all over the infield. You've got Jorge Mateo, who can play up the middle, and he can play the outfield. Rivera can play first base and third base. The only one out of all those 6 players that seems to just slide right on out for me, Glenn, is Emmanuel Rivera. But I also, again, cannot justify paying Ryan O'Hearn $8.5 million from July 3rd on, Glenn, basically starting July 4th. He hit 231 with 4 home runs the rest of the season. And you're banking on that guy being a left-handed DH for you against right-handed pitching and your backup first baseman. And all of this is before you even consider Kobe
and that's
Mayo.
where I just Mayo to me would be a bigger priority than that group. But again, like I'm still throwing in a lot of hope there. Like Kobe Mayo's
he doesn't have a position.
So is Mayo and Kjerstad the combination that you're talking about, right? Like, is that more of the? I'm still struggling. I know what you said, and that they're saying that Tyler O'Neill's here to be an everyday player, and that's all well and good. Like, that's a lot for me. For me, it's a lot to make that jump. And the argument being that even if he isn't as productive against righties, that you still need to have him in the middle of the order because he's a threat to knock the ball out of the ballpark, and you need to have him there, and pitchers need to be concerned about him and how they go about pitching to Gunnar Henderson ahead. Like, I get the argument of why Tyler O'Neill should be an everyday player, even if the numbers don't justify him being an everyday player. But I don't know. That's, to me, somewhere where I might be trying to find at-bats for Heston Kjerstad. Like,
well, and the point needs to be made. Heston Kjerstad's a former 2nd overall pick. He's 25, 26 years old at this point. He needs to be that guy. Like what he's done at the minor league level, he doesn't need to be there anymore. No. He needs to be an everyday player,
or he needs to be what you're using in order to address something else, right? Like, you've reached that point. This is the point of no return with Heston Kjerstad. Either you're running into the risk of him becoming Connor Norby, who you look at and say, well, he's just never getting an opportunity here. So even though he doesn't have a lot of trade value, we're just going to we've run out of trade value on Connor Norby, right? Like, and all we can do is get kind of a throwaway pitcher for him. Like, you really do run that risk with Heston Kjerstad, that by just holding on and holding on and holding on, at some point, everybody else looks up and says, is he still a prospect? Is he still that desirable to us? And instead of using him to really address something, you find yourself getting the next Trevor Rogers with, Heston Kjerstad at the trade deadline this year. So there either needed to be confidence that Heston Kjerstad is a legitimate everyday player in this lineup one way or another, or you had to prioritize using him in a deal to address something that really was going to help your baseball team this offseason.
Yeah, and you look at teams that could use outfield help that have decent to really good starting pitching. You look at Cleveland, you look at the Miami Marlins, you look at the Seattle Mariners. All 3 teams need outfield help. They need big bats in their lineup. Heston Kjerstad could be part of a package to bring you a starting pitcher. I just know that I'm looking at the guys on this roster, and I know that Ryan Mountcastle, and I'm fine with Mountcastle being here because they moved that. I think that in part they moved that left field wall in because they need Mountcastle to be who he was supposed to be. And I think that wall has been 100% in his head. But I know beyond the shadow of a doubt, Ryan Mountcastle and Ryan O'Hearn are walking down that orange carpet at the end of March. I am certain of that. So
I don't know why they're
Kjerstad,
married to Mountcastle specifically, right? And I get your point. Like, well, why move the wall if you're moving? The wall can be for Tyler O'Neill too, right? The wall can be for any right hand.
Mm-hmm.
I hate trying to make it seem like because I really do love Ryan Mountcastle and respect the work that he put in to become a really good first baseman, and I think he's a legit Major League Baseball player. But you needed upgrades offensively, and you can't move on from anything to the left of that on the infield. You can't move on from. You have 3 infielders that are all penciled in. Those are the guys. So the upgrades can't be at second base, shortstop, or third base. And I know that a couple of people in the comments have made the argument that maybe some of those guys should be playing different spots. That's conversation for another day. You got 3 guys over there in Westberg, Henderson, and Holiday that you cannot move on from. So then it limits. Colton Cowser is going to be one of your outfielders, right? You couldn't upgrade there. So the list of places where you have the opportunity to upgrade, and obviously you're not upgrading at catcher. Adley Rutschman's your catcher. So there's 5 spots that there was no upgrading on whatsoever. So it left you with, you could try to upgrade in right field, center field, first base, and DH. But, again, how many teams want to have an everyday DH versus using DH spot? For Adley Rutschman's going to have to DH a certain number of times this season. So I understand it's unique here in Baltimore. So really 3 spots you could try to upgrade from. I think we all had the conversation about Cedric Mullins where you say, yes, in a perfect world, maybe you find a more complete baseball player. But what Cedric Mullins offers you when he's right is not just really good, but even it's just different. It offers you something that no one else offers. So I understand why you're not looking to move on from Cedric Mullins necessarily. I understand why they would say, okay, we're going to stick with Cedric Mullins in center field. His range is absurd. And yes, while he's not the most consistent offensive player, when he's on, he's great. And even when he's not fully on, he's still different than the other guys that we have. And that has value to us. Fine. So you're left with right field and first base as the opportunities to upgrade. Guys that you're not married to long term. They didn't upgrade right field. They switched it out. They moved the deck chairs a little bit. I would suggest that on the whole, certainly from last year's guy, it's a downgrade. But I get it. Anthony Santander for his career wasn't what he was last year. So I can listen to the argument that Tyler O'Neill it's a negligible change. So that left you with one place where you had the opportunity to legitimately upgrade, which is first base. That's the one spot that's left that you can have a chance to actually upgrade. Their argument would be move the wall. We are upgrading, right? Ryan Mountcastle with the shorter wall or shorter dimensions will be an upgraded version of Ryan Mountcastle from the last couple of years. Probably true. Probably the case. But you needed even better than that. You needed a serious upgrade somewhere on this offense, and that was the one place. So marrying yourself to Ryan Mountcastle, as much as I like Ryan Mountcastle, and if we said this in a vacuum, do you want Ryan Mountcastle on the team or not? I think we'd all be like, yeah, of course we want Ryan Mountcastle on the team. But in the context of all of the other places where you can't move on, it was the one spot. It was one of 2, but you already addressed one. It was the last spot that you really had an opportunity to get better. And I know Pete Alonso's name has come up in the comments. Yes, right? Like, I get it. You can't always be the team that acquires players on expiring contracts either. Like, you're going to run out at some point if you keep doing that forever. You can't just keep saying our plan, because we're not going to pay anybody, is let's just find everybody's expiring contracts while we have Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman. But at least it's something. At least it would be, some sort of active attempt to upgrade the baseball team. That was the spot. And so that's the frustrating thing for me, is because if they are just married to Ryan Mountcastle, you're not going to upgrade the offense the way you needed it to. You just need everything to go right for you with all of these other guys this season. And it's an awful lot of hope.
Well, and I like the idea of Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso is that thumper. he's your prototypical 4 hitter. Like, he's going to hit 250. He's going to hit 40 home runs and drive in 100, and he's going to impose fear in the opposition. Tyler O'Neill, in my opinion, is a much fitter, more injury-prone version of Pete Alonso. I don't think you can add 2 of those guys to your roster because now you're just becoming a beer league softball team. For me, and that's why I was so, headstrong about Juan Soto. And I know that the money was never going to make sense for the Orioles. And at 15 years, what was it? 15 years, 756 million or 765 million. I'm good. Like, I don't need that contract, but I think that this team is desperate for a guy that's going to hit 280 to 300 and get on base at a 360 clip. I think Gunnar is that guy, but Gunnar, the second half of the season, especially, I think he put too much on himself, and you saw him get real small in some real big moments. And I think that Gunnar has to realize, and it's like Mookie Betts told him on Mookie's show, you're that dude. People know who you are. You are that dude. You need to start acting like that dude. And I would love to see Gunnar take that next step to not be an MVP candidate, but be an MVP this year, because he's got all the talent to be that guy. But until he does that, the Orioles still need to address a big hole in the middle of their order. Before we continue with that, everybody watching, you see 2 beautiful men on your screen right now. Well, this one beautiful man technically my left, but to my right on the screen, has a show every single day. It's called Glenn Clark Radio. If you missed anything from Glenn Clark Radio this week, including Jim Bowden, Navy football hero Landon Robinson, Mike Golick Jr., and more, you can find them all right now in the Glenn Clark Radio Week in Review feature at PressBoxOnline.com. And watch or listen to GCR every Monday at 10 a.m. at PressBoxOnline.com/radio, right here on Facebook and YouTube.
It's my mom's second favorite show on our network, by the way. It's mine.
Oh, what's her first favorite show?
She's a big bat around.
Really? I don't know if you're joking or not. I'm gonna pretend that you're serious.
I know your mom was a listener, actually, which I always appreciated. I know she was a fan, which my mother, it's not for her. Not for none of this.
That's quite all right. My mom does tune in pretty regularly. She tuned in every day to GCR when I was there, and she tunes in every Saturday. Yes, very sweet. We're spending Christmas with her today, so that's coming up at 2:00 today to prelude the Steelers-Ravens matchup. Anthony Santander. It's rumored that he's seeking a 5-year deal worth anywhere from $100 to $150 million.
Oh, me too. For the record,
Glenn, I love.
I am also seeking
for sure. If PressBox wants to sign me for 5 years, $100 million,
I'm up for it. I'm not on contract. I'm available for anyone. 5 years, 150. That's about what I'm looking for. Yeah.
Hey, look, if you want to split 5 years and 150 million between Glenn and I, we can be a package deal, 2-for-1 special there. I'm just putting it out there. Look, I love Anthony Santander. I love the things he did to get his body right so that he could maintain for 162 game season. He's played 153 games or more each of the last 3 years, 28 or more home runs each of the last 3 years, power from both sides, a switch hitter. Serviceable in right field. He catches the balls that he should catch, and he catches a fair amount that he has no business catching as well. If anybody gives Anthony Santander 5 years at $100 to $150 million, they should be shot. And maybe I shouldn't say that because of all the things going on in America right now. So let me rephrase that and say they probably shouldn't be working in baseball if they're giving Anthony Santander that kind of a contract. And I love the guy. He's on the wrong side of 30, and he's kind of a one-dimensional player at this point in his career. And I think it's Exhibit A why he remains unsigned, that's his asking price. Glenn, can you envision a scenario in which he doesn't get that kind of a contract offer and the Orioles are willing to give him 3 years at 60 to 72 million? Can you envision a scenario in which he comes back?
Probably not, because of the logjam that we just talked about. It feels like the moment they made the Tyler O'Neill move, there's just not an option left, right? Like, it just feels like that's the case. I guess the ironic part about it, right, is that I know everything you're saying about Anthony Santander, but I also know you're a Cody Bellinger guy, right? And the numbers for Anthony Santander are definitively better than the numbers for Cody Bellinger overall. But they just okay. Let's go back. OPS this year, 814. Last year, 797, 773, 720, 890, 773. There's only one year in there that is at the level of what Cody Bellinger, other than 2023, has been since 2020, right? Like it's a strange thing, and it's the added benefit of him being a switch hitter, right? Like that makes him even more valuable than that. I'm not trying to tell you that I think Anthony Santander is a $30 million a year guy. That feels like a lot, but this is also baseball in 2024, and there's a lot of money that doesn't make complete sense that gets thrown around. And I know he's not a pitcher, so it's a hard. You're not gonna you see the pitching numbers and you just say that's what it costs to have Frankie Montas. That's what it costs. Like, it's just crazy money that's being thrown around at this point. So I just think the reality is there's no spot, with the exception of, and has been brought up by a few people in the comments, if they do use Ryan Mountcastle, Heston Kjerstad, Kobe Mayo, some combination of those guys to try to acquire pitching, and that logjam is lessened, and to your point, in a few weeks, Anthony Santander still doesn't like what he's seeing, and everybody looks and says how different the world is, then yeah, I mean, look, I'm always going to be in favor of it. I love Anthony Santander.
I do too.
The one thing that, as you talked about him defensively, like the arm, I don't see any reason to think there's going to be regression in his arm in the next 2 to 3 years. Like maybe 5 years down the road, that's where we're talking, but I see no reason to believe that that's going anywhere. So even if you think some of the additional range that we've seen from Anthony Santander is more of an anomaly, that's not really who he is, he's always done a great job of making up for that with the arm. And to add to it, clearly, if you've got Cedric Mullins in center field, then you don't need your right fielder to have as nearly as much range. But it's still just difficult for me. Like, is Tyler O'Neill going to DH? Is Anthony Santander going to play first base? And then you neutralize that arm that is part of what makes him particularly valuable. Is he going to be that's sort of what I'm struggling with. It just feels like the Tyler O'Neill acquisition slams the door shut on any potential reunion with Anthony Santander down the road. Like, it doesn't seem likely that you can make that work somehow. But, get back to me again. If they move on from Mountcastle or Mayo or Kjerstad in a trade in the coming weeks, or two of them in trades for pitching in the coming weeks, then yeah, well, let's talk about it at that point. And I'm certainly not going to be opposed. Like, it's funny because we know, like, Santander struggles at the start of the season. We know all of his warts, right? Like, we know all of the warts with Santander. But you actually sit down and look at the numbers, the pure raw, and again, I'm just looking at OPS. He's exactly what every team needs. Like, he really is the exact bat that everyone needs. And their argument is, well, most teams have their Anthony Santander. And so that's probably why, he's not demanding, the big money that he's looking for on the free agent market. But it is hard to, on the whole, knock what it is that Anthony Santander gives you.
Well, I'll tell you that he would do himself a world of good if he could prove that he could go out there and hit in April and September.
Of course.
A lot of his numbers come between May 1st and August 31st. And you look at his career, that's what happens. And recently, it's been more like late May through the end of August.
Yeah, and obviously last year, he put up an ungodly June that completely changed the perception and led to him having the best season of his career.
Right.
And that's it stands out a little bit in that way, but still, like, just the raw. If you're telling me I'm adding a guy that's a pretty consistent 770 to 800 OPS guy, yes, that's going to be my answer. I can always use that guy on my baseball team.
And I looked at Cody Bellinger's numbers, and you're right. The OPS, the on base percentage, it just hasn't been there recently. Right. But you also look at his 2019, his rookie year, his 2019 season, his 2023 season. And Anthony Santander has never put up a season like that. The seasons that he put up where he's got a 360 on base,
he's never threatened 1,000 OPS.
That's why, like, I think Cody Bellinger can still be that guy, and he's still just 28, 29 years old. So that's my argument there. Don't really have a good segue. Just want to remind everybody that PressBox's annual Best of issue is available now. And on the cover, we celebrate our Mo Gaba Sports Person of the Year honoree, Lamar Jackson, and inside a collection of the top people, performances, and moments of the year in local sports. You can find the Best of issue all throughout the region, including at 60 Royal Farm stores, and you can read it all right now at PressBoxOnline.com. Glenn, is this Lamar's second time as the Sports Person of the Year?
No, so the first time was in 2019. What happened in 2019 is that was when we decided that Mo Gaba was going to be Sports Person of the Year. And then, of course, Lamar had a MVP season, and we were sitting there like, what do we do? But we were committed that Mo Gaba was the correct answer, and we were really proud of that. And so what we did is we put on the cover Mo and Lamar to sort of reflect the year that Lamar was having and how special it was, and make sure that we weren't ignoring that. And it ended up being, the best cover in the history of PressBox, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But he was not Mo. He was not the sports. Mo was the Sports Person of the Year that year. Lamar was on the cover and was our best Raven, our athlete of the year that year, all of those things. But he had never been. It's part of what made this year so easy, right? Like in one, there weren't really a lot of, at a time, it could have been Gunnar Henderson. It could have, there were a lot of, it could have beens for a little while. But ultimately, by the time we got to the end of the year, between the season that Lamar was having and the fact that he had never been our Mo Gaba Sports Person of the Year, the conversations were not very difficult by the time we got to about October. We were like, yeah, there's really one candidate to be Sports Person of the Year this year. So
sure. And even though Lamar almost won a second unanimous MVP last season, it was really what he did down the stretch in the time that we're currently in, where those last 5 games.
And that's really there's no doubt. And that made it difficult because for print reasons, we have to commit to a decision by, at the latest, we have figured it out that we could push it all the way to like December 1st. There's got to be a hard cutoff. We have to have a plan. I'll give you some of the behind the scenes. We could write 2 different cover stories and just pick which one is going to run on December 1st. But also last year, the Orioles did win 100 games.
Exactly.
That doesn't happen. And while 2022 was fun and was a neat season, it was also the first season they were back in the playoffs and they had won the division. And we did think that was still really worthy of being reflected in the cover. And so that did play a huge factor. And look, there is some of that is the disappointment of how things went this year for the Orioles. I'm telling you, if we had this conversation in June, we would have been like, dude, Gunnar Henderson's well on his way to being, our Mo Gaba Sports Person of the Year this year. But the way the second half of the season went, it opened the door. I'll tell you openly that David Rubenstein was a big part of the conversation about Sports Person of the Year, because we all remember what that feeling was like that first week. And there's new ownership, and we wanted to throw a parade, and now Corbin Burnes is here and they're out buying beers, and it was just like the greatest feeling ever. But here we are later on in the year, and you can't really justify that. Nothing really came from it. So, I mean, we had conversations about other people, but this year, I would say, unlike last year was extraordinarily difficult. It really was extraordinarily difficult. And it's why, despite the fact that Brandon Hyde was our Sports Person of the Year, the cover was the entire team, because we didn't know how to reflect what we were saying. I don't like the idea of just copping out and saying, hey, it's everybody. And that was kind of the conversation. Should we just make it the Orioles as our Sports Person of the Year? And I didn't love that. I thought we needed it to be one person. Okay, so maybe Hyde and Elias. Well, last year's trade deadline, as we remember, kind of stunk. Like they really swung and missed. And, ironically, Jack Flaherty turned into a guy a year later, but it was a huge miss last year at the trade deadline. So could we justify Elias? This year, when it came down to it, maybe there was a moment where we thought about it being Lamar and Derrick Henry. Like for a second, we were like, would that be a cool cover? The both of them. But Derrick Henry's been around for, a cough in Baltimore. And part of it being the Mo Gaba Sports Person of the Year is that we wanted to reflect relationship with the community and what you mean to the city. And Derrick Henry's a hell of a football player, but there's not really a deep connection between Derrick Henry and Baltimore at the moment. So, really can't be easy.
There's really no athlete in Baltimore at this current moment that has that means more to the city than
No,
Lamar Jackson does. And we're going to talk. I do want to talk to you a little bit more about this later in the show before we get out of here today, because it's a big day in Baltimore with the Ravens Steelers rivalry continuing this afternoon at 4:35. It's also a big final 2 days for Hartford Holidays. Hartford Holidays is overflowing with the spirit of the holiday season. You'll be amazed by the jaw-dropping light displays, thrilled by a visit to Santa's workshop, and have the holiday time of your life with sleigh rides, a special vendor village, s'mores making stations, and so much more. It's a holiday light experience new at Ripken Stadium, and today and tomorrow are your final chances to check it out. For ticket information, head to visithartford.com. That is visithartford.com. Glenn, you were talking about how the longer we were talking a little bit about how the longer that Anthony Santander is out there, the more it seems like he could be had for a lesser deal. We're looking at the same thing kind of with Corbin Burnes. The flirtations between Burnes and the San Francisco Giants are real. I speculated on the only show after the playoffs ended for the Orioles, that the Giants were probably the favorite to land Corbin Burnes. It just makes too much sense for it not to happen. He's a West Coast guy. He lives in Arizona. Obviously, San Francisco is on the West Coast, and they train in Arizona during spring training. It makes too much sense. However, these rumors have been out there now for about 2 weeks, and Corbin Burnes is still out there. There's also a little bit in the rumor mill that suggested he may be willing to accept a shorter deal for a higher AAV. Like I said, seems to be mutual interest between he and the Giants. Why has he not signed yet? Now Jeff Passan's saying he's probably not signing until after Christmas. Yeah. And the Orioles are still being linked to Corbin Burnes. Is there a realistic chance that this team still ends up with number 39 back in the Orioles, black and orange?
I guess, how do we define realistic, right? Like, if you use it that way, I would still say no, because ultimately I still don't think this number is coming down dramatically. It is interesting that so many dominoes fell and Corbin Burnes was not among them. And that makes you wonder, if did Max Fried change the reality for what they were looking for? If Max Fried got this number, did all of a sudden Corbin Burnes and his group turn around and say, yeah, well, if that's what Max Fried is getting, then the price of the brick just went up for us. Because I think going into the offseason, I don't know that we even knew that the Corbin Burnes number was going to be the Max Fried number, right? I think a lot of us were thinking that Max Fried was going to be available at an Orioles price. And as it turns out, he got the number that we thought was going to be more likely for Corbin Burnes. So do I think the Orioles ultimately spend more money for Corbin Burnes than the Yankees spent for Max Fried? I don't think there's a chance in hell. Not a chance in hell. And my best guess is that's where Corbin Burnes' camp is. That Max Fried readjusted what we believe the market should be for Corbin Burnes. With the problem being, how many teams really are in the market to pay anyone that amount of money or more for anyone, right? Who are you negotiating with now? Because the Yankees already did that. They spent their money. They got their guy. So who's left? Does it become the Dodgers or bust for Corbin Burnes? Either the Dodgers have to give you the Max Fried plus contract or you're not getting it. I guess somebody would say, hey, the Mets already spent the absurd money on Juan Soto. Why couldn't they still be in the market for, if they're just throwing around play money, why stop throwing around play money now? Why would you suddenly say, just go get everybody? But it's very plausible. As much as we have all believed the Giants were the most logical landing spot for Corbin Burnes, that if really what they're saying is, okay, it's got it. That was 7 and 215. Was that the number for Fried?
7-2-18.
Yeah, 7-2-18. So it's got to be 7-2-40 at least.
8-2-40.
Yeah, 8, something in that neighborhood for Burnes. Who's getting that? Who's in play to give out that type of contract? How many teams are there? The Rangers have not been as insane. They decided to go back to Eovaldi, which again was something that a lot of us thought would be in play for Baltimore.
Yeah,
that might have been their way of saying we're not spending that type of money on pitching. So this might become like a standoff of, The Dodgers, knowing they're not negotiating against anyone, like we've got no competition. Nobody else is going to the neighborhood that we're willing to go to. So you keep trying to hold out for it to be this specific number, but we know there's nobody else competing. So here's the number. We're willing to give you the free deal, or maybe a little bit less than the free deal, but we're not going past that because there's nobody competing with us. It's funny because I was not. I know you did the read for GCR yesterday. It wasn't me. It was Stan was in for me because I was dealing with some family stuff this week. But like Jim Bowden was campaigning. Like if there was ever going to be a time, you have the guy. That's the guy. Commit to it. Just do it. Say this is going to be the one time. And his argument is right. Like we can all sit back and say these moves will hurt the Orioles more than they would hurt other teams. And that's true, unquestionably. I was in on Fried. I know you will love Fried. Like we were, you can say till you're blue in the face, the Yankees can absorb a contract like that if it goes poorly in a way that other teams can't. 100%. That's true. No one disagrees with that. But at the same time, you can't miss if you're not swinging. Like, you can't just keep not swinging and thinking that it's going to work out. There is no parade for fiscal responsibility. There is no banner for, well, you made less bad moves than everybody else did. Like, congratulations. We're going to celebrate you and put you up on a dais and let you speak about how you avoided giving out bad contracts. At some point, there should be a time where it's worth the risk of giving out a bad contract. Is Corbin Burnes the best option for that? I don't know, but he doesn't have an injury history. Like, if there was ever going to be a moment where you considered it, I don't think the numbers coming back down to a number of the Orioles, it would still require them to go far beyond what the Orioles would ever be comfortable giving anyone.
Yeah.
But I do think it's worth us saying, if not now, when? Like, are you just saying we'll never swim in these waters? Ever? Because this, as we keep talking about, this is the moment. You have a core. You have all of these boxes checked.
You have ownership willing to spend money.
And it's almost unfathomable to me that you're not, if you're just saying we're never going to spend money on a pitcher, it's just never going to happen. I guess, but Corbin Burnes would seem to be the guy. Like, he would seem to be, if there was going to be a moment where you come swim, this would be the moment to take that swing and go for.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that if there's a world where Corbin Burnes is willing to take 3 to 4 years, $120 to $160 million, I think the Orioles absolutely need to swing in those
It would be asinine for them not to be. I mean, that would be, if it got to the point where Corbin Burnes was taking a shorter term deal from someone and the Orioles weren't willing to do that, then all of the, this group that would be comically stupid for the Orioles to not be in on a shorter term Corbin Burnes. That would really make you say that there just never will be a moment. There never will be a time. It didn't matter that the ownership changed. This organization is never going to spend money on a baseball player, and you can cry about the disparity between big markets and small markets, but it would give you an answer. If Corbin Burnes gets down into short-term contract range and you're not in, holy S. Like, holy S.
You can't justify that to your fan base. Something else that would also be comically stupid would be if you're a big-time Ravens fan and you are not joining Glenn Clark, Rita Hubbard, and Super Bowl 35 champion Femi Ayanbadejo after every Ravens game this year for PressBox's Project Game Day. Glenn, Rita, and Femi break down what online.com/game day. Did you hear me?
Yeah, we are actually hosting our first Christmas. Yeah, I got you. You hear me, Paul?
Yeah. There was just a pause there. Yeah.
No? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're also, on top of everything else, we're hosting. Yeah, I hear you good. We're hosting a Christmas gathering for my wife's family tomorrow. So there's gonna be a lot of multitasking in my house today. There's gonna be a lot of, like, this will be the first time ever during maybe even the Ravens game where there's a timeout and I run into the other room to move some chairs around and say we got a hell of a day.
Well, God bless you. I hope you're a better multitasker than I am. I'm certain your wife is depending on that.
And Twitter is hell for that too, because you find yourself getting during games, you send out like one tweet, and then
Oh
all of
my
a
God.
sudden, like you're in a 6-layered conversation, and you missed a play because it sucks. It sucks. So
And it's like such a necessary evil. You were preaching
yeah.
to the choir with that one, man. So we do something on this show, Glenn, where we go through the viewer interactions towards the end of the show. So many comments today, like maybe a record for comments today. So we're gonna try and kind of go rapid fire with these, if that's all right with you.
Yep.
Randall, big participant in the show, wanted to let you know prayers for you and your family with what you're going through
Thank
today.
you,
So I
Randall.
wanted to make sure you
Appreciate
saw that.
Very
AJ says, get Sasaki and do a 6-man rotation. Teoscar would also be nice.
Yes.
Teoscar, I would love it. I think Teoscar is completely out of Baltimore's possibilities at this point. Sasaki, look, if Sugano is the precursor move to get Sasaki into Baltimore, yeah, I would love that. And I'd be do an 8-man rotation for all I care. Get some legitimate starting pitching onto this.
Yes. 1000%. 100. Look, Sasaki is the easiest one that you should be in. I mean, like it's the no-brainer of no-brainers, because it's not, you can't use the money as the excuse for why it is that you aren't. Like 1000%, you need to be as aggressive as you possibly can. And to the point, like if you say, hey, they found out that he really loves, he looks up to Sugano, that's one of his guys, and you think it's a difference maker, then even if Sugano stinks, then maybe it becomes worthwhile. But yeah, obviously you should be pursuing Sasaki as much as you possibly can, but all of the reporting has suggested that there would be more desirable locations for Sasaki than Baltimore to this point. We'll see if that changes.
Yeah, for sure. Zach Moore, he says Holiday has 40 at bats versus lefties and 41.7% hard hit rate. That's pretty interesting. Only 4 hits, but 40+% hard hit rate might translate. Look, I have all the faith in the world that Jackson Holiday. I mean, he was 1-1 for a reason. I think Jackson Holiday is going to be a 320 hitter at different parts of his career. With legitimate power, like 20 to 30 home run power. He just has to have the opportunity and get the substantial playing time that's going to get him to that point. I have faith that he can hit any pitching in the world. He just has to go out there and prove it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we all thought it was a cop-out last year when they used the lefty thing as the reason to not put him on the opening day roster. We were all like, oh, okay. We rolled our eyes about it. But obviously in hindsight, it's something that you really do think about more. Jorge Mateo is going to play, and particularly early on, it probably makes sense that he's going to play second base against lefties, but to the point, it shouldn't be everyone. It should be that you're getting Holiday at least some opportunities to prove that he can hit against lefties, so that he can be the guy that we all think he's going to be. It probably is the most plausible scenario that you're finding at bats for Mateo that way, but every now and then you need to find them at bats somewhere else so that you can. And again, center field would make sense, right? Like every now and then, it's Mateo in center field against a lefty, and you got to keep Holiday in the lineup to give him the opportunity to adjust and prove that he can hit him.
Randall seems to have 2 opinions about this. 1, he thinks Mateo gets traded midseason, and 2, he thinks Holiday should be a center fielder with his speed and glove.
A lot of people have talked.
What about his arm?
Yeah, I don't know, right? It's funny though, because I would tell you that Dan Duquette is on the list of people that believe that Jackson Holiday could be a center fielder. It certainly has athleticism. There's no question about it, right? I guess the next question becomes, if Cedric Mullins isn't your center fielder, why wouldn't it be Colton Cowser? Like what hasn't Colton Cowser shown you that said, I had some Colton? And look, Colton Cowser, for as good as his range is, it's still not Cedric Mullins, because you're talking about, Cedric Mullins' range encompasses just about everywhere. So it's an unfair comparison. But if you're moving on from Cedric Mullins, it's for Colton Cowser to be your center fielder, because he's earned the right, like, to be your everyday center fielder. So I just don't know. I don't know why you'd be looking to solve a different. You're almost creating a new problem. You want to talk about? And also, who's playing second base now? Why are we moving Jackson Holiday off for who?
So that Jordan Westbrook can play second base and Alex Bregman can come in and play
Well,
third.
now look, again, if that's the conversation, let's have it. And I mean it. Let's have that conversation.
Sure.
But short of that, I don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Getting back to Sugano, Zach Moore says, I'm interested to see his velocity here. We clock velo out of the hand, and Japan clocks it at the batter. And Greg Olson says the U.S. clocks the gun higher. This is all news to me. I have no idea what goes into all this, but I don't know. I find it hard to believe that 92 in Japan is somehow going to translate to 95, 96. Not saying not saying that that's what Zach's saying, but I don't know how much more velocity he's going to gain.
Well, and to say, would it be a difference if he was regularly sitting at 94? Yeah, there would be some difference there. Like we would feel
sure.
92, I can't believe I'm about to say these words. When you say 92 to a certain percentage of people, they're hearing soft tosser, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that
used to be a flamethrower in the early 90s.
Yes, 100%. When you say 92, when you say 94, that's not all that different than some of the best starting pitchers in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think there's a significant, if that's true, and he is more regularly reading at 94, I think we feel a completely different way about Sugano than we do when we think the answer is 92.
I'm very interested to see how Sugano does because the ball is different in Major League Baseball. The mound is different in Major League Baseball. Now, look, he pitched on a big league mound in the World Baseball Classic, and he had a dominant performance against the U.S. team. That was also just about 8 years ago. So I'm interested to see what he's going to be worth and to see if he has any impact on Sasaki coming here. Zach goes on to say, do you all put any stock into that report last night that Sasaki rejected the Phillies meeting because of how their fans treat their players? I have heard that he may be willing to play for a smaller market because he doesn't like the spotlight. I have heard that. And so this kind of coalesces with that. I just don't know how accurate that is. I don't know what to believe.
I think it came from a Twitter account called MLB_scoops. And so I'm going to say no. No is what I'm going to say. I put no stock into it. At the moment, like if there were 3 more like follow-ups, if there were, from somebody that has a name and a reputation, like, then yeah, let's have that conversation. The point, yes, his agent at the winter meetings did say that like a small market could be particularly appealing, but in fairness, he's trying to have everybody involved, right?
Yeah.
Like he's going to say, if somebody, well, what do you think about large market teams? Well, I'd also like them too, right? Like he's got a job to do as an agent, which is to make sure that his client is appealing to everyone. So just
like Scott Boras saying that, yes, the Orioles are absolutely still in and aggressive for Corbin Burnes.
What else is every day? Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Like, of course, because he wants them to be in. Like, he needs them to be in, whether they are or they aren't. The Sasaki stuff, the 2 things that I keep coming back to are apparently his feelings about Yu Darvish, right? Like, that has made San Diego seem very logical and likely, which again has made people think about the Dylan Cease of it all. And then, Seattle, given their history with Japanese players, like with Iwakuma and Sasaki and obviously Ichiro, like there's been this almost pipeline. So those 2, but Seattle doesn't need more pitching. That said, it's Sasaki. You solve that problem once it's there, and then you try to use the other guys that you have in order to go get hitting. I still think that it's less likely Baltimore for Sasaki than some of those other places, but God, would I love to be wrong about that?
I would love for you to be wrong about that too. Let's get into some of our viewers' thoughts on free agency and trades. AJ says Mountcastle and Suarez for Zach Gallen, or O'Hearn for Montgomery, and have the D-backs eat most of that salary. I mean, yeah, and in an ideal world, but are they willing to give up Zach Gallen?
That's insane.
Yeah, there's just no chance. Right. And O'Hearn for Montgomery. I mean, I don't think they want Montgomery there. I think the owner came out and tried to get Jordan Montgomery to not pick up his player option by saying all these terrible things about him. And I think it just made Jordan Montgomery be like, "Ha, you're stuck with me now, buddy." Yeah, you know what I mean? Like Ryan O'Hearn is not a guy that they're going to trade Jordan Montgomery for. And Mountcastle and Suarez is in no way, shape, or form enough to get Zach Gallen. That's just not accurate.
Nope,
yeah.
Not at all.
Zach goes on and says Tanner Scott or Kirby Yates or AJ Minter. I would take any of those guys. You need one of those guys for the back end of your bullpen, because I'm sorry. People keep talking about how the Orioles bullpen is pretty good right now. I disagree. I think they have guys who can be good in spurts.
Yeah.
But are you telling me that in big game situations you trust Keegan Aiken or you trust CNL Perez or Gregory Soto or Sir Anthony Dominguez? Like, the only guy back there I definitively trust is coming off of Tommy John surgery.
Correct.
So, like, you've got to add other players. And look, if these guys are still out there, they're out there and willing to be had. So let's go get two of them. Get all three, you know?
Well, yeah, I don't think they're going to do that, but yes.
Yeah. They should. They have the money to do it. I'm just, but it's
and then it's the question of which becomes your priority. If they are willing to spend money, is your priority that they spend money on one of those guys, or that, you know, and this is a very complicated conversation to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if tomorrow they announce they signed Tanner Scott, what's Tanner Scott for
80?
80? Is it 80? God,
probably. He's probably going to get $20 million a year.
God, man. Okay, so they announced they signed Tanner Scott for 480, right? Like, your immediate reaction is, okay, great, but then the secondary part is, well, they're definitely not getting Corbin Burnes. Well, that's the immediate, like, where your mind goes. You can't even enjoy a signing because the next thought is, well, what does that mean they're not going to do? Like,
well, but then I think you can also enjoy the signing because you're getting the shorter term deal with the high average annual value for a guy like Tanner Scott, and having a guy like Tanner Scott and then adding maybe Kirby Yates or AJ Minter, certainly not all three, but getting two of those guys, you can justify having less in your starting rotation because you've shortened games at this point to about 5 innings. If your starter gives you 5 innings of 2-run ball, you're winning a lot more than you're losing.
Yep, that's true.
With that bullpen, you know. Randall says O should trade for Seattle's Miller and pay for Buehler. I love the idea of Walker Buehler being here. We saw what he did in the World Series. He's not going to cost you a ton. He's also probably willing to take a 1-year make good deal, right? To try and re-enter the market next year, prove that he's healthy and still that dude every 5th day. He's a guy who you could probably get for a year with a club option or player option for the following year. See, for Bryce Miller, you've got to give up something, and you've got to be willing to give it up. Is that a situation where it's Heston Kjerstad and Ryan Mountcastle are on the move to Seattle for Bryce Miller, and are you willing to pay that
yeah,
price?
It feels like a hefty price for Miller, doesn't it? Like, that feels like although I get it, again, as we kept saying about Heston Kjerstad, at some point, he's either got to be an everyday factor or he's got to help you get something. And if he helps you get Bryce Miller, that's better than what you ended up trading Connor Norby for, obviously. So
yeah,
I'm not saying no to that. We really are in a moment, like, you're not moving Kobe Mayo for the sake of moving Kobe Mayo, and I'm certainly not saying you're moving Heston Kjerstad for the sake of moving Heston Kjerstad, but we're closer to that point with Heston Kjerstad right now, and I hate saying that, but that's where we are. He's
either got to play every day for you, or you've got to send him someplace where he can play every day and get a good return for him.
Correct.
There's nothing else for him, and to a certain extent, Kobe Mayo to prove at the minor league level. They both have to prove it now at the big league level. I don't know how you do that by playing more AAA games. Let's see here. AJ says I would have Westberg at shortstop and Gunnar at third. That's not happening. It's and I hate to be so dismissive. Gunnar is the face of your franchise. Gunnar is absolutely the face of your franchise. He is your one superstar. And that dude plays shortstop for your team. He's not playing third base.
Look, that said, like, we can't pretend like what we saw we still have eyes. Something went wrong last year, and the organization has to have the ability to say, like, that's not good enough. I agree with you. Like, if he wants to play short, he's playing short. Like, that's the way that this works. But at some point, there does have to be a conversation of, dude, what happened? Like, what's going on? And do I think it's because Gunnar Henderson can't play short? No, I don't think that's what happened. But something went wrong. I mean, like, it was bad.
Well, for one, and I talked about this on the show last week with Zach. He doesn't set his feet. He's
Right.
constantly running through the baseball and throwing on the run, and that's where he has a lot. Most of his errors were throwing errors. He had that little blip in the second half where it just seemed like he was bobbling routine ground balls left and right. He doesn't square up in front of a baseball. He doesn't set his feet when he throws. He can. He will get better. I also just think it's the same thing that happened with his bat in the second half, where he is a player who knows he's the superstar on this team, and he's trying to do too much and shrinking in a big moment. And that also comes with the fact that he's 23 years old. He's been around for 3 seasons now, but he's still a very young player who's adjusting to the big league game and the speed of the big league game. When he unlocks that potential, Gunnar Henderson, it's going to be eye popping. He already is eye popping.
Oh, there's no question. Right.
Yeah. Daniel says, what about Pete Alonso for middle of the lineup upgrade? Yeah, we talked about that big time thumper, but you've already got like 3 guys that can hit 240 with a 315 OBP and hit the ball out of the ballpark. I mean, at some point you've got to get a guy that can hit 270 and get on base at a 350 clip.
I hear you. You don't have a guy that nobody in this lineup is hitting 50 home runs, right?
Right.
Like that is the difference with Pete Alonso. You have this is when Buck Showalter would talk about big hairy guys. Like Pete Alonso's, he's the big hairy guy, and that is different than. I know exactly what you're saying. Pete Alonso's still elevated from that group just because he's going to hit 15 more home runs than any of them are going to hit in their best year. That said, again, you gotta ease that. Adding Pete Alonso to everything you already have, that math doesn't math. It would have to go both ways. You want to add Pete Alonso, it's got to be because you're using other guys to go get you pitching. And then the risk of that is Pete Alonso's only here for 1 year. Did you just trade away Heston Kjerstad? And it's for a guy that's only going to be here for 1 year.
Right.
It's a deeper conversation. And maybe you're convinced that Coby Mayo is your first baseman, but you're not ready to make that commitment right now. So you do move Mountcastle and maybe even Kjerstad, and you soft pedal Mayo this year, more DHing with Alonso at first base. I'm listening to it. I'm listening to all of it. I don't think it's likely.
Yeah, I don't think it's likely either. And I can tell you almost assuredly that if Pete Alonso signs with the Baltimore Orioles, that's the end of Ryan Mountcastle and potentially Ryan O'Hearn in Baltimore. And speaking along those lines, AJ wants to know, is Coby Mayo now the everyday DH and is O'Neill playing the outfield every day? Coby Mayo started the year at Norfolk. There's not a doubt in my mind that he's playing either third base or first base every day. It has to be first base.
Well, how many games was it? Where is he with PPI? I haven't done that math with Coby Mayo yet.
I think he played 27 games last year, something like that.
So that's not enough that it would ruin. He's not out of Rookie of the Year consideration.
No, he's got to get 100. You've got to get 130 at bats. Before.
And again, can they even think about Coby Mayo being a contender for Rookie of the Year? Because do they have enough at bats for him if he's on the Major League roster all season to get him into the conversation? That really is where this math has to come into play, right? Like you got to have that. They almost snuck one out with Colton Cowser last year, despite the fact that Colton Cowser had a good month. That's what he was.
Don't say that around these parts, Glenn.
No, I love Colton Cowser. I think Colton Cowser can be a really good baseball player. It's laughable how much we were fighting about Colton Cowser as Rookie of the Year, because all we were really saying is we think there were no good rookies in the American League. Like that's really what we were saying when we were fighting about Colton Cowser as Rookie of the Year is, well, the rookie class in the American League was so bad that Colton Cowser could be Rookie of the Year. And that's not there's two different conversations there. The first is about Colton Cowser. I love Colton Cowser. I think he offers a heck of a lot to a baseball team. But was it worth fighting for Colton Cowser to be Rookie of the Year based on the season that he had? No.
He's got to learn how to hit something other than a fastball.
Right. I mean, that's the reality of Colton Cowser. But I do, as an overall baseball player, I like Colton Cowser a lot, and I think he's going to be a big part of the story. But that would be the one thing about Mayo is, do they think that he has a chance to be Rookie of the Year? And if they think he does, then he needs to be on the roster in the first week of the season in order to make that possible. So they got to think that a little bit. That was the entire conversation about Jackson Holiday last year, right? Like, I understand if you think he needs more seasoning, but you got to get him up here so that he can qualify you for PPI, because you can't just be, particularly considering how you're not willing to spend money on baseball players, you cannot be lighting potential draft picks on fire. Imagine if the pitching thing was true, if they really aren't willing to consider pitchers because of the draft pick compensation, like, and then them not prioritizing having players on the roster to try to get them extra draft picks. Like, that math,
it doesn't math.
You can't be one and not the other.
Exactly. All I know at this point in the offseason, Glenn, is that I don't know jack. What I do see is a roster that has too many similar players, too many people for too little positions, and not enough pitching. And so I in my heart of hearts, there's no chance that they aren't making a significant trade at some point. Look, Corbin Burnes didn't get here until February last year. So I look at that and I say, something's coming down the pipe here. I have no idea what it's going to be, but the roster as it currently stands is not going to be close to the roster that it's going to be when they come north at the end of March. I'm going to call it for the comments. We have like 100 more comments, and we'll be here till 1:00 in the afternoon if we continue to hit all of them. I do apologize. I'll try to get better about responding to the comments as they come in. It's just so many. Probably a record for the show. Today's show has been brought to you by County Sports Zone. Find every score from every high school sporting event all year long at countysports.zone. Proudly sponsored by your local Toyota dealer and buyatoyota.com. Glenn, before we get out of here, I do want to ask you, Ravens Steelers, big matchup going on today. Lamar Jackson is in the MVP conversation, but there's all this discourse about how Josh Allen is the MVP, and it's his to lose at this point. Can do you believe that to be the case? And can Lamar Jackson, with a big game against the Steelers in a victory today, thrust himself back to the top of that conversation?
The top, it would MVP is a horse race anymore. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's what MVP has become. It's a horse race, and nobody knows how to define it. Like, all these dopes on the internet are like, well, Josh Allen's the MVP because they don't have an answer. They just don't. They've just decided that's the way it is. But what they can't say out loud is it's a horse race. Whoever's leading the horse race, as long as they keep running the way they're running, they're going to win, because everybody's made up their mind, and there's groupthink, and Lamar's won 2, and Josh Allen hasn't won 1, and their record's a little bit better. They've made up their mind. That's why Josh Allen's the MVP. And then everybody else says, hey, but look at Lamar's numbers. They're actually a lot better than Josh Allen's. Why would Josh Allen be the MVP? Well, because Josh Allen beat the Chiefs and he beat the Lions, and they were the 2 teams that we said were the best teams. So we're defaulting to Josh Allen as being the answer. I'm not worked up about MVP anymore. Like, Lamar's got 2, and he's got no Super Bowl to show for it. Like, win a Super Bowl. Like, that's the only thing. Be Super Bowl MVP. That's the one this is a Sean Parker in the Social Network. You think $1 million is cool? It's really cool. $1 billion. Like, that's the where MVP is cool. Super Bowl MVP would be really cooler. So I'm kind of out on it. Like, if he has a big game today, and boy, does he need it for spiritual reasons. We can talk about all the anomaly of the games that Lamar Jackson hasn't played against the Steelers, but the truth is he is still 1-4 all time against the Steelers. And in the one, he didn't play well. He needs to have a moment for spiritual reasons. Let's end this conversation about the Steelers having his number. That all has to go off the table. But if Josh Allen turns around and has a huge game tomorrow, they'll probably default right back to saying Josh Allen's the MVP. So it's got to be for get this off your back. Stop allowing this to be a thing. There is still more anomaly than fact in the discourse about Lamar Jackson and the Steelers. There's way more. It's bizarre how few games he's actually played against the Steelers in his career. It's crazy how that's worked out, with the NFL putting those games in week 18 in the season, there being nothing at stake for the Ravens, and COVID, and Lamar getting hurt. And it's crazy how little he's played against the Steelers, given how deep he is into his career. But Still, he's got to author a chapter in the history of the Ravens-Steelers rivalry, and this franchise needs it. Again, we can say it's an anomaly, but they are still 1-8 in their last 9 games against the Steelers. They've got to get this monkey off their back before the playoffs and to get that positivity going in that way. It's also crazy, as been pointed out by a few people, it's nuts that Lamar Jackson has never played a game against the Steelers in Baltimore in front of fans. It's asinine, or started a game. How is that possible? But yet that's where we are.
Yeah, the one game that he played in Baltimore in front of fans was when they only allowed 10,000 in 2020, and that was a game that he threw, I think, 3 picks, including a pick 6, and Ronnie Stanley's ankle was just completely steamrolled.
Yep.
Like it was just a cavalcade of terrible in that contest. I'll tell you, I'll use a Ray Lewis quote here. I think Lamar Jackson is pissed off for greatness right now. I think he knows what's at stake. I think the whole team knows what's at stake with the game today, and I expect him to come out and put up a huge game. Now, look, every single game against the Steelers is a 1-score game, so I have no reason to believe that it's not going to be. But I have reason to believe it's not going to be a close game today, especially without George Pickens and a hobbled TJ Watt. I think the Ravens win this one going away. Hey, look, everybody, if you are looking to find something to do, if you're like me and you need to have something to look forward to, and you're looking forward to Christmas, and after that it's like, well, what's next before New Year's? Go out to the Governor's Challenge. The top high school basketball talent from across the country returns to the Wacomico Civic Center December 26th through the 30th, where you can witness 5 full days of elite competition featuring over 140 high school basketball teams. For tickets and info, visit govchallenge.org. That's govchallenge.org. Before we get out of here, Chaz, you said, so can I watch this on the website? You can watch this show on PressBox's Facebook page, facebook.com/PressBoxSports, if I'm correct, Glenn.
Yeah, absolutely. Facebook.com/PressBoxSports.
And you can also go and watch on youtube.com/PressBoxOnline to catch up on this show and any other of PressBox's content. Go to either page and you will find our content. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Without you, we certainly don't have a show. Thank you, Glenn, for joining us and going significantly longer than we ever intend to go, but this happens all the time. So thank you so much for a great, great show today. Thank you to all of our fans and our viewers, anybody that interacts. Without you, we certainly do not have a show. Glenn, what can we plug for you before we get out of here?
I got one thing that I want to say. No, we do this huge thing, and Paul, you've always gotten in and supported. We try to helping up Mission every holiday season. Because I had a death in the family this week, I wasn't able to put together a final event. So what I'm doing is on Monday, I'm going back in. We're going to do a Glenn Clark Radio holiday drinking show. Either we'll be celebrating a big Ravens win or we'll be lamenting a crushing Ravens loss. But we're going to do a holiday drinking show with a few of our friends, like Jeremy Kahn will come by, and Drew Forrester, and some of the regulars. If you've taken Monday off of work, swing by the PressBox office, 8600 LaSalle Road, Suite 509 in Towson. And if you go to glennclarkradio.com right now, you can find out more about it. And if you bring by, what we need for helping up Mission is toiletries, underwear. Just go run by Target, pick up a pack or two of underwear, men, women, whatever. We just need unopened things that we can take, or you may be willing to make a cash donation. I have 12 autographed pictures of Zay Flowers that the Ed Block Courage Award Foundation donated to me. So the first 12 people that stop by, come have a drink with us, enjoy some jocularity, and my buddy Dennis Shockett's going to be playing some tunes during the show. Just going to be a festive atmosphere, but starting at 10 a.m. Monday, come by, please. And if you bring by either a tangible donation or cash, we will hook you up with an autographed photo of Zay Flowers, courtesy of the folks at Ed Block. So that would be mean in the world to us as you help us help the Helping Up Mission.
I'll tell you, drinking with Glenn and Jeremy is something to behold. I haven't had the pleasure. I just happen to have seen and heard about the repercussions of it. I already know what Glenn's alluding to here. So if you need more incentive than that, you have 12 different Zay Flowers pictures autographed pictures to choose from just by stopping by and dropping off a donation, whether it be cash, underwear, toiletries, what have you. Glenn, thank you so much for joining us today. Is that your normal show, 10 to 12 that particular day, or is it going to be a little longer?
We'll probably go a little bit longer than that, but yeah, anytime after, I would say, like, if you stop by between 10 and 2, it's pretty safe. It's pretty safe.
Okay.
And if you want to at Glenn Clark Radio on Twitter, you got questions, GlennClarkRadio@gmail.com. Just hit me up and I'll get you details. But yeah, we'd appreciate it. And Paul, love you. Merry Christmas to you and your little family. Appreciate you as always, pal. We'll talk real soon. All right.
Love you too, brother. God bless you and your family in a difficult time. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas to you.